What is going on, FA Nation? John Impemba here with Eric Romoff. We are looking at week 12 of the NFL season kicking off here tonight. Thursday night football action in the AFC North between the Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not sure how exciting this one's going to be. Certainly not like the last week Thursday night football where we had, Hurts and Daniels going back and forth. This one, the weather is supposed to be kind of bad. So, the game total is around like 37, 38. What are your expectations for tonight here, Eric?
Yeah, definitely a holistically different vibe than the one that we had heading into Thursday Night Football last week. Like you mentioned, the weather will be a factor, but honestly, I think we're kind of heading into one of these classic AFC North sort of battles, right? It's probably going to come down to a field goal. It's going to be hard fought, a lot of the ground game, and a lot of interesting individual matchups and one-to-one spots here that I think we can take a closer look at.
Yeah, 100% for sure. We'll go over some of the showdown plays. We'll take a look at some props for those of you who have them. If you have start-sit questions, we can certainly go ahead and help you guys get your lineups set for week 12. As crazy as it sounds, fantasy football playoffs for most starting week, 14, 15. I think Scott Fishbowl playoffs are already out or something like that that's going on. So, there's no shortage of prep needed, and definitely some questions that could be had. So we appreciate you guys tuning in. Hit that like, that subscribe, that share. We'll be here for as long as you guys need us for this evening. Obviously, kickoff today, 8:15. You mentioned matchups to target here. You obviously did the wide receiver quarterback coach. You have that out for the Thursday night football game. George Pickens, obviously a top wide receiver in this matchup, performing really well now that Russell Wilson is his quarterback. What does he draw today against Cleveland?
Yeah, so he gets the honor of running in the coverage of Martin Emerson Jr. for the Browns, a matchup that on paper looks to be kind of neutral, right? There are some spots where Emerson is a little bit better than league average, others where he's on the wrong side of league average. So, a macro level analysis that would be, sort of a non-factor. But you look more specifically at Emerson and where he is giving up production and is down the field, right? Down the field and into the end zone. He's got nearly a 14-yard per catch average on the season. He's given up 4 receiving touchdowns on just 26 receptions this year. So these are things that play very nicely into the strong suit of George Pickens, especially in this version of the Steelers offense where Russell Wilson is thrown to the end zone like 15 or 16 times in just a handful of games. He loves throwing for touchdowns.
On the other side of this matchup, since Jameis Winston has become the quarterback, we've obviously seen a high amount of pass attempts. In fact, over 40 pass attempts now in 3 straight weeks, 46 pass attempts in each of the last 2. So if you're a wide receiver on the Cleveland Browns, you are getting peppered with targets. What are your expectations tonight for these Browns wide receivers, whether it be Jerry Jeudy, you had the big game, Elijah Moore, Cedric Tillman, David Njoku, and then, how much do you think the weather actually factors in to Winston in his performance tonight?
Yeah, so this is kind of the tricky part of it, right? The good news is exactly as you laid out, right? Jameis Winston came in and, as expected, immediately started slinging the ball all over the yard, right? 41, 46, 46 are his pass attempts over the last 3 games. That is exactly what you want to see as a fantasy manager of really any Brown pass catcher. This week, though, it's gonna be a little tricky, right? Our guy Kevin Roth is out there giving the most up-to-date weather report for this game,
Right.
and it looks like we're going to see 15 to 20 mile an hour sustained winds, gusts of 25 to 30 miles an hour. That's really the point where it becomes very prohibitive to the pass game overall, right? Anytime that you're talking gusts north of 20 even, it can become very tricky to move the ball down the field. So maybe this is the week where we see Jameis Winston's pass attempts walk down a little bit, right? Get closer to like that 35, 38 range, which is still plenty of pass attempts out there, but maybe not quite the heights that we've seen over his first 3 games.
Given obviously these 2 defenses here, we have 2 teams that also don't mind running the football. Nick Chubb hasn't exactly looked Nick Chubb like, and I don't think we should have had that expectation given the severe injury that he's coming off of, but they have given him double-digit carries in all 4 games that he's played. And then you have Najee Harris. Both teams obviously have pretty good run defenses. Jalen Warren's been starting to get a little bit more action as well. How are you feeling about these running backs today?
Yeah, I think the ground game is probably where I'm going to be looking to attack in terms of the DFS approach for tonight. And specifically, the name that I want to call out is the one that you mentioned towards the end there, Jalen Warren. You know, over these last handful of weeks, as he's returned from injury and reemerged into this offense, we're seeing him get an increased workload. Right, 9 carries
Yeah.
in his last game, 14 in the game before, 9, 12 in the 2 preceding that, but also starting to catch the ball a bit more out of the backfield. And what's most promising for Jalen Warren is he's seeing a fair amount of red zone carries, even though he's not getting a high volume of overall touches. So looks like they are going to him in these high leverage situations more and more. He does look a little bit more dynamic with the ball in his hands. And, you know, as we talk about these kind of messy game conditions, these high agility, short area quickness type of players tend to have a little bit more of an advantage than the kind of straight line, either speed or brute force type of runner that is, you know, more of Najee Harris's profile.
Right. The tight ends here. Obviously, David Njoku, a high volume target tight end. But there was a tweet that went out earlier this week that Russell Wilson's actually throwing more to Washington than Freiermuth since he has taken over. Do you have any interest on either side of the tight end spectrum here?
I mean, my most interest certainly lies with David Njoku, right? He's certainly the most skilled player with the ball in his hands of this lot. He also has a stranglehold on the
Yeah.
opportunities that are going to tight ends for the Browns, right? I do think we will continue to see a bit more of a split between Freiermuth and Washington, however incremental it might be. So Njoku would certainly be the priority of this group. And I think, you know, akin to what I was saying with Jalen Warren, right? He's the player that is the most dynamic with the ball in his hands, has the ability to make defenders miss, to break tackles. These are things that, you know, these are the margins where you'll win a DFS matchup
Right.
in, you know, in this kind of sloppy game.
When you're looking at a showdown slate, how much does someone like Mike Williams interest you for tonight? Obviously, we saw him with the touchdown catch, the other week. He's coming over. He's had more time to, practice and be with the team. Do you think that at his value here tonight, again, after not getting targeted last week, is there anything for him that would make him appealing tonight?
Uh, Leverage would make him appealing, right? I don't think he's going to be all that popular. Cost savings, right? He's someone
Mhm.
that you can fit into your builds pretty easily and gives you some flexibility with the rest of your roster. You know, generally speaking, in these kind of messy weather games or low scoring Thursday night affairs, which this game checks both of those boxes.
Yeah.
You tend to see a lot more defenses, a lot more running backs, and those players aren't all that expensive anyways, so you're not really in need of a whole lot of salary relief on tonight's slate. But you know, getting him at 3.2K, I think the most interesting thing about him is that we are seeing his time on the field increase. Obviously, he immediately came in his first week as a Steeler and caught that go-ahead touchdown and, you know, had the highlight reel play. But he did that on just a handful of snaps, right?
Yeah.
He played 9 snaps in that week 10 game. Last week 11, we saw that jump up considerably, up to 25 snaps, 32% snap share overall. And it came largely at the expense of Van Jefferson. So I think that we see Mike Williams kind of break past the midpoint and become the primary right wide receiver in this Steelers offense. Fortunately for him, that means a date with Denzel Ward,
Right.
one of the more difficult and dynamic shutdown corners on the perimeter in the league. Even this year, having kind of a down year by his standards, he still has the ability to completely remove a receiver from the game plan. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see Russell Wilson look towards George Pickens a bit more, look towards Calvin Austin a bit more,
Sure.
towards his running backs out of the backfield, and it might be another quiet night for Mike Williams.
Some questions we got coming in here.
Let's get him.
Traded Garrett Wilson for Drake London. He's feeling pretty happy. Which side of the coin would you rather have? Obviously, Aaron Rodgers has failed to live up to some expectations. Wilson's had some big weeks here. How you feeling about Wilson in London rest of the season?
Kind of neutral, right? You know, this feels like trading for the sake of trading because it's fun to do, and I do
Sure.
it all the time. I don't think you really gain a significant edge one way or the other. What I will say is that I think you probably have a bit more of a stable projection moving forward with Drake London. This is an Atlanta team that is going to continue to be competitive and to try to fight their way into the playoff picture. Whereas I wouldn't be surprised if down the stretch run we see the Jets kind of start to pack it in and lean into the reality of the direction of their season this year. So,
Mhm.
on the whole, Wilson actually has a much steadier base of targets and volume, but I think post bye week we're probably going to see the Jets kind of ramp down a little bit.
Sure. Um, Trade away Pickens for Cook. PPR. Here's Chase, Pickens, Ladd, Marv, Jacobs, Brown, and Najee. So would you rather have Pickens given your wide receiver depth to acquire James Cook? Which way we lean in on this one?
This one's tricky. I like it. I can get behind this. Obviously you've got the wide receiver one in Jamar Chase. Lad McConkey is a player that I'm very bullish on. He started
Mhm.
to emerge over the last few weeks, and I think we're only just now beginning to see what he can be in this league. All of his measurables and his advanced analytics look very, very promising. And obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. has that pedigree and seems to be getting more and more comfortable. Really, for me, I think it's more about it's more about just depth at the running back position, right? This is typically the more injury prone of the positions. These are the ones where, a key injury or a shakeup in a backfield can really, really nerf your playoff outlook. So I'll err on that side, but I guess in a vacuum, I like Pickens slightly ahead of James Cook.
Okay. Yeah, I like that call. Again, just sort of the upside with the way that they're throwing the football right now. Pickens has some big play potential there. Should I start Pickens, or are you worried about the weather, says Surgeon Kill?
I am worried about the weather. I don't know if you should start Pickens. It would depend on your options, right?
Sure.
In even accounting for the weather, I still have Pickens as a rock solid wide receiver too, right? So unless you have a multitude of top 18 or so guys that you can slot in front of him, I'm probably still firing up Pickens, but I do have some concerns specifically with the wind.
Agreed. Trying to Jave in the chat. Love you. Appreciate you. Hit
Dave.
that like, that subscribe, that share button, everybody. We're here to help you guys set your lineups for week 12. Would you bench Jameis in the weather? We're a 2 QB league for Quentin Johnson. So you'd be benching your quarterback for a wide receiver, but a wide receiver against a defense that is allowing the most passing yards in football. I almost never bench a quarterback in a 2 QB league. I get the weather concerns and even Pittsburgh's tough defense. Where are you leaning with this one?
Yeah, I'm very close to you. Although I will admit the idea of firing up Quentin Johnston specifically against Brandon Stevens is the stuff that fantasy dreams are made of,
Mhm.
right? But in terms of baseline and what we can project going forward, even in a bad weather game, Jameis Winston is going to project for a higher median point of scoring than Quentin Johnston is in
Yeah.
a plus matchup.
Yep, I agree with you there. Antan, what's up? Hey, Ann, she wants to know. I have to start Judy or Tillman. So, which Browns wide receiver are we going with tonight?
That one's a bit trickier. I guess I would err on the side of Jerry Judy, right? We are projecting Joey Porter Jr. to shadow Cedric Tillman this week. Joey Porter Jr. shadows at about the third highest rate in the league. So Tillman should see a lot of the sophomore breakout cornerback. And while he's not performing quite up to the standards that we saw last year, he still is doing a very effective job at least kind of diluting the productivity of his primary assignment. So
Yep.
Jerry Judy, last week showed us every bit of the Jerry Judy that we saw at Alabama, right? He kind of had his breakout game as a
Yeah.
Brown. And I think that, in terms of the overarching game plan, I think it's going to be a little bit more of the kind of lateral near the line of scrimmage, short to intermediate passes in
Yeah.
the game plan for the Browns. And Jerry Judy's ability to create yards after the catch is significantly greater than really anyone else in that receiving core. Maybe not named David Njoku. So of the two, I would lean towards Judy.
Yeah, listen, I was super high on Judy when he came out of college. I thought he was a great grab for Denver. I thought getting Russell Wilson was going to kind of like give him a real quarterback, and then it never really materialized. Then he had his own issues, drops and
Mhm.
health and whatnot. And it's good to see him start producing. And again, when you got a quarterback throwing 46 times a game now the last couple of weeks here, you're just going to have those opportunities. Brian, I don't know who to start in my last flex, Chubb, Dowell, or Abdullah. Of course, Madison and Zamir White, highly questionable this week. So there's a chance Abdullah is the feature back for Las Vegas against Denver. You have Rico Dowell and everything that isn't happening with the Dallas Cowboys in their offense, and then Nick Chubb tonight against the Steelers.
Yeah, that one's a little tricky. I think I would err on the side of Dowdle here. He was announced as the lead back in Dallas heading into last week's game, and he came out and got at least the workload that would be required to earn that title, right?
Yeah,
So with the running back position, especially with three guys like this that are just kind of meh, I tend to err on the side of the one who I've got the most confidence in their workload. And while there should be opportunity on the table in Las Vegas, it's also a non-zero chance that Dylan Laube gets in there and
sure.
takes some of that work away from Amir Abdullah as well.
Yeah, at the very least, Abdullah's going to get that passing down work. So you got that going for you. Ann, what's up, Ann? Wants to know Jerome Ford, Xavier Legette, Michael Pittman needs 2 for a PPR. Obviously, Ford the backup, pseudo backup, passing down work for Cleveland right now. Legette gets Kansas City matchup, and Pittman. Who are the Colts? Are the Colts playing this week? I should know. I should know that. What the Colts got on
The Colts are playing Detroit
Detroit.
this
Okay,
week.
so what are your thoughts here? 2 for PPR.
Yeah, of these three, I think I'm sending Jerome Ford to the bench. Like you mentioned, John, Ford largely occupies that third down, passing role, and I don't think that we're going to see the type of scoring that would lead to a lot of passing to the running backs for the Browns, right? I think this is going to be an ugly kind of field position game. So Ford's opportunity was already kind of minimized, and I think
Yeah.
the game script works further against that. I understand that Pittman hasn't lived up to the expectation that we drafted him with, but he walks into a pretty juicy matchup against this Detroit Lions secondary, right? They kind of alternate between either drawing a bunch of flags or giving up a bunch of
Yeah.
yardage, either of which will work fine when you're talking about this kind of flex level player.
Yep, I'm with you there. Trey has Warren, Chubb, and Pickens. Who are we starting? Do you need just one? I think if you're picking one, you're going Pickens here. I know the weather is certainly the concern, I think, with the wide receiver versus the 2 running backs. Where do you lean here?
Yeah, if we're starting one, it certainly is Pickens, in spite of the weather concern, which latest reports look like they're holding steady, 15 to 20 mile an hour sustained winds, gusts 25 to 30, and obviously plenty of precipitation in the area. So definitely going to be an ugly game. Even with that, of these three, it'd be Pickens by a pretty good margin.
Yep, I'm with you there. Do I have the bench Pickens? I have Sutton and Reed as backups. I mean, when you have backups like Sutton versus Las Vegas, I think I would go there. Reed this week, I think bad weather in Green Bay too this weekend, right? Do I have that correct?
Yes, we are expecting a bit of weather in Green Bay as well. We have the benefit of Sunday being a few days out, so that
Sure.
weather can always change. And at least where we sit right now, it doesn't look like there's going to be as much wind for the Packers on Sunday as there
Mhm.
is heading into this matchup tonight for Pickens. So I would actually move Pickens to the bench if I have options
Yeah, I
as
really,
strong as that.
really like Sutton here this week against Las
Mhm.
Vegas. I'm definitely going there, even with Jack Jones. Maybe a guy, someone's gonna be on him in the outside there. I still think it is a great spot, and of course, Ann, we're always here to help you guys out. Eric, looking at some props here for tonight, do we think rushing attempts are going to be key given the weather? We have Najee Harris at 18 and a half, Nick Chubb at 15. Do you think both, one or the other, or neither go over their rushing attempt totals tonight?
Yeah, it's tricky, right? At least over the last season and a half, 2 seasons, there's a pretty good baseline or trend that we can follow of teams reducing the running back workload on Thursday night. It is a tough spot, and that is a position in particular that is is particularly susceptible to
Yeah,
being run into the ground and overworked. So I tend to err on the side of unders for carry totals,
sure.
especially in circumstance like this where Warren can mix in there for some work, where Ford can mix in there for some work. Where those two lines sit, they feel pretty sharp. I would probably walk away from each of them, but
Okay.
if I wanted to bet a running back side, I like how their yardage totals look. Right, we expect them to see a decent amount of carries, and running backs, wide receivers, offensive players, they know where they're going, and the
Yeah,
defense does not, right? So they have the ability to get a little bit of additional yardage. If a defender loses their footing or is just a little bit slower in closing as they work through the turf conditions. So I would lean towards the yardage as opposed to the rush attempts in this
sure. We got
case.
54.5 for Nick Chubb there. Najee Harris's yardage sitting at 73.5 yards here. Obviously, we had that run of like 4 or 5 weeks in a row where Najee was just absolutely killing it, falling off a little bit, maybe coinciding with Jalen Warren being back, that the Najee Harris rushing yards are down. But again, if the weather holds out, like they may just be forced to try to run and kill some clock. Trey wants to know our thoughts here on David Njoku. I know we did mention that a little bit at the top of the show, but pass volume wise, matchup against the Steelers, what do we think for Njoku here tonight?
Yeah, I think he's certainly a startable option, right? It's hard to imagine a circumstance, or at least a likely circumstance, where you have anyone better than Njoku to fire up this week, right? Even with the weather, even with there being suddenly plenty of capable mouths to feed in this Cleveland receiving core, David Njoku is still sitting at tight end 6 for me, right? So
Yeah,
unless you manage to pair him up with Brock Bowers, or you're still, reaping the benefit of Kate Otten being out there. There probably aren't a whole lot of guys that I would start over him. Point being,
Goff or Tua here this week. Goff has a pretty elite matchup going up against. I say that I'm like, oh yeah, no, I draw a blank on exactly who he's got, but I remember writing it
Colts.
up.
It's
The
got the Colts
Colts,
this week.
yeah. I did the quarterback coach earlier today. He's like one of my favorite guys. So Goff gets the Colts, and Tua gets the Patriots here, who we saw Stafford and Cup and Nakua just light that team up last weekend. Where are you going with the quarterbacks this week?
Yeah, this one's kind of tricky. I would err on the side of Tua. I'm referencing my ranking.
Sure.
To be fair to that, I've got Goff literally one spot ahead of Tua this week. So following those rankings, it would be a nod to Goff. These guys are right next to each other. My concern with Goff is I wouldn't be surprised at all if this white hot Detroit defense is able to generate some turnovers and maybe even some points off turnovers,
Mm-hmm.
and we see Detroit maybe take their foot off the gas for a change. All told, both these guys are in phenomenal spots. I like Tua as a big favorite. They tend to run the score up, but the same can be said for Goff this season. So as a tiebreaker, I will hold true to my rankings. I'll go with Goff here, but I mean, these are two guys that could easily be inside the top 7 or 8 at the position this week.
I agree. We have uh, thoughts on trading Flowers for Jennings. Certainly worried about the inconsistency and then the week 14 bye. So they acquired Jennings, trading Flowers. Jennings, leading target man for the 49ers. Been really good. Do you have any qualms there trading Flowers for Jennings?
I do not. No. Juwan Jennings, both in terms of his fantasy production, but also his underlying advanced stats, all look phenomenal. I think he's stepped into that Ayuk role and performed very, very well. Brock Purdy, he's got some underlying stats that are very, very positive
Mm-hmm.
for him this season. So I think the arrow is pointing up there. If nothing else, right? Like Baltimore is still one of the lowest teams in the entire league in terms of percentage of throws or targets that go to the wide receiver position. You get that sneaky benefit of Baltimore has their bye week in week 14, and San
Yeah,
Francisco has already passed that bye. So you get an entire week of starter level production out of making a heady move like this.
I agree with you 100% here. Now, there were some concerns today. Purdy popping up with a shoulder They're hopeful he'll play. I guess we'll see what happens. He pulled himself out of practice. For the report, sometimes these things get overblown.
Mm.
We haven't heard any additional reporting on Purdy and any sort of severity on the injury. Was certainly something to watch for. He made that trade. He's got London, Higgins, Nakua, Ridley, and Waddle. Like he was loaded at wide receiver anyway. So you didn't even really have to be all too concerned there. Again, for tonight's game, you have Steelers, you have Browns. Game total for this one, let's see, we have the most recent, down to 36.5. Steelers are giving 3.5. So the weather, I think maybe this game opened at 39, I think it was. So now we're already down to 36.5. Maybe an opportunity to take the over if you're thinking maybe it's starting to be overcompensated for the weather. And then you got Pittsburgh giving 3.5. Which direction do you lean with the total and the spread here?
Yeah. I mean, this line is plummeting, right? And generally speaking, it's a pretty profitable stance to fade the public. So an over sounds appealing for that reason, but also you think about how prolific this Steelers defense is. You think about Jameis Winston's propensity to turn over the ball in even sterile circumstances, and now you incorporate weather and wind. I mean, look, with 36.5 points, like they don't have to do much, and all of a sudden we've got some short fields or maybe even a defensive score to get past it. So I think I would lean towards the over in this case.
Okay.
I certainly like Pittsburgh to win by more than 3.5 points. I think they should probably be about 5-point favorites in my book.
Yeah, I agree with you. The first thing I did this morning was I woke up and bet the under. It was at 37.5 at first. I was like, you know what? It opened at 39. It could keep going down. I'll grab it now at 37.5 and see what happens. It's a full point under what I bet it at. And I'm kind of feeling the same way. Pittsburgh, really good defense. We saw what they did to Baltimore, a far better offense, we think, consider than what the Browns are going to try to do. And if the weather really is an impact, we know that Winston can be turnover prone. He may not be able to throw. And if they're forced to run, like, can they run the ball enough with Chubb and Ford to make any sort of dent against Pittsburgh? So I'm kind of with you there. I took the Steelers given the points there, and I took the under on this game here as well. Any other questions for you guys? Let us know. Eric and here will hang for a couple more minutes, like this one right here. What do I do? Who do I drop? Who do I drop for Amari Cooper? So Amari Cooper became available in your league. Maybe this was a guillotine league, possibly, but Cedric Tillman, Quentin Johnson, or Josh Downs, or would you just not pick up Amari Cooper? I feel like you want Amari Cooper.
You do want Amari Cooper. Man, this one is not fun. Drop almost anyone else on your roster to go out and get Amari Cooper.
Carrying like an extra quarterback you don't need, or
tight end defenses, kickers, right?
Yeah.
Even this is a time of year where if you're holding like an implied value upside running back that's not your handcuff, you can hit the bricks, pal, and go out and get Amari Cooper. I guess to the nature of this question, I would, keeping Cedric Tillman, I think I might drop Josh Downs, and I really don't want to.
Yeah, obviously worry about Anthony Richardson just as a passer, right? He's at the worst quarterback of that group.
Yeah, easily.
Tillman's got the most competition for targets with Moore and Njoku and Judy. We saw that last week where he was third in that group. So
yeah, I think with Tillman in particular, right? Like he was third in terms of that, the pecking order for production, but his role largely remained unchanged, right? He saw 8 targets, he had 119 air yards, right? It was just one of those cases where variance kind of broke in the wrong direction for him. I think we're still going to see Jameis Winston chucking the ball 40-ish times a game, which is delightful. And, Anthony Richardson, for as dynamic as he was in that game, we've got a much larger sample size of him having a hard time connecting with Josh Downs, and an even greater sample size of him completing like 13 passes a game on average, right? So, I mean, look, I'm kind of grasping at straws because I don't want to cut any of these guys, but that's how I would kind of devise that approach.
I would say, like, if your trade deadline's not out yet, like, make a trade maybe, like.
If nothing else, right? Like in the world where your trade deadline has not passed, go and cut your starting kicker or starting defense so that you can grab Amari Cooper and then try to go out and make a 2-for-1 trade to clear up a roster spot.
Yeah. And listen, I get it. He said, Downs did have a good game with Richardson. It's true. He's probably the only receiver that Richardson is throwing to, but like you said, the floor is so low there. I feel a little bit more better. I get the Johnston thing for sure. Good matchup this week for him. After that, it does get a little tougher. So maybe Quentin Johnston. I definitely want Amari Cooper, though. I think you keep Tillman, probably get Johnson or Dyer. Start tonight, Judy or Devonta? Well, the problem with Devonta is that he showed up on the injury report today. And if you don't have any other options and Devonta Smith ends up getting ruled out, then you're kind of in a tough spot there because Judy had already played this week. So I think in the other league, you have to play Judy and sit Devonta. I don't know if this is a start compared to who. I think he's fine. I think they're going to throw tonight. It's not like they're just going to run the ball 40 times like the Patriots did in Buffalo like 3 years ago. Like Jameis will get 30 probably pass attempts tonight. But, it just all depends on the quality and obviously the matchup there.
Yeah, a man is only as loyal as his options, right? So it depends on who Judy would be starting over. In the case that it is a 1-to-1 with Devonta Smith, just make sure that they are in your flex so that if something goes sideways with Smith, you can at least cover your bases with some scoring. And I would then leave Judy on the bench.
I agree with you there. So, guys, we do appreciate you all tuning in. You can go in our Discord. We got the 7-day free trial going on, fantasyalarm.com/win. Promo code Let's Go the first month after your 7-day free trial for less than $20. I know Dan Malin is in there. He's got a showdown playbook all ready to go to get you guys up and hopefully cashing on what should be a fun-ish maybe slate, maybe not, but it's football, right? We love football here, Eric. So it gives you all something to go do and watch compared to Darius Slayton with all his other wide receivers on a bye. So Judy or Slayton? Last question here.
It would be Judy for me of those
Judy
two.
For sure. I agree with you. So everybody, we do appreciate you tuning in. We'll be back Sunday, myself and Andrew Cooper from 11 to 12 to get you ready for the Sunday slate of games. Eric and I will be back next week, week 13. Playoffs are coming. Good luck, everybody. We'll talk to you later.